So hi everyone, my name is Liz Barteldt. I'm a freshman here at UNC. I'm majoring in environmental studies with a minor in business. So today I'm going to talk about my experience at the Center for Sustainable Enterprise. Um, I interned there this semester. It's based out of Keenan Flagler Business School here at UNC. And my internship mainly focused on North Carolina businesses and their climate change commitments. So first, I want to start off by explaining the Center for Sustainable Enterprises mission. So CSE focuses on working with students and businesses to create impactful business solutions that accelerate progress in private sector sustainability. Secondly, I want to highlight my amazing mentors I was able to work with this semester. Tracy Triggs Matthews, the Associate Director, and Jeff Middlestat, the Executive Director. They have both been a vital part of why my experience at CSE was so rewarding. So I wanted to say thank you to them. So although my internship was fully remote this semester, we did meet weekly via Zoom to track the progress we were making on our projects. So here's a photo of me and my mentor, Tracy, a couple other interns working on other projects, and my partner for the internship, Zuyu Lee. So my internship was broken up into 3 parts throughout the semester. I first analyzed and researched companies in North Carolina that had emission reduction goals, specifically a type of emission known as Scope 3. This type of emission is particularly tricky for companies to reduce since it includes all indirect emissions that aren't actually owned by the company. So this can include emissions that are produced once the product is in a consumer's hands, once it ends up in a landfill, as well as transportation and distribution of the product itself. So since it's such a tricky emission to reduce, I wanted to learn more about how companies were actually reducing it and methods that they were doing to achieve that. So secondly, I interviewed various directors of sustainability at these companies that I believed had an interesting story to tell, specifically North Carolina businesses. So this gave me greater insight into the plan that they had for reducing Scope 3 emissions, the goals they had, and the challenges they were facing with reducing those emissions. And then lastly, I compiled all of this information into an ArcGIS story map, which is like a website like platform that allows you to share a narrative alongside a map, which I'll show you in just a second. So here I displayed my research and my findings from the conversations I had throughout the semester, as well as potential solutions I strategized for the companies. So here are the companies that I interviewed. All of them were private sector businesses, except for the North Carolina Environmental Stewardship Initiative, which is actually a governmental organization that works with private industries to help them with their environmental certifications and reducing emissions. So to touch more on the interview process, I asked them mainly questions about Scope 3 emissions, whether they had Scope 3 emission reduction goals, the challenges they were facing with that, and how that was being addressed. Secondly, how they were collaborating with North Carolina companies and nonprofits related to their climate change commitments to help them reduce their emissions. And then whether they had suppliers in North Carolina, which would help to reduce transportation and distribution emissions. And then lastly, what their vision for sustainability was moving forward. So here I'll show you what my story map looks like. I'm still waiting on some final approval on some things. So it's not totally done yet, but it will be available on the CSU website probably within the next couple months or so. So if you want to look at it in greater detail there, that's where it will be. So here I'm just explaining my project, and then I go into more detail about the different kinds of scope emissions. And then here's the largest part of my project where I talk about all the things I learned from the companies I interviewed. It's very detailed, so I won't go through all of them, but yeah, this is what it looks like. And as you can see, as you move between different companies, moves to a different part of the map based on where they're headquartered. And then lastly, I strategize potential solutions for reducing Scope 3 emissions, which includes action-oriented conversation, partnership and collaboration, and then local sourcing and consolidating supply chains. And then my partner's part of the project is down below, but that is for her part of her presentation. So lastly, I want to talk about the takeaways I learned from this internship. I learned a lot From this internship, firstly, I went in knowing very little about sustainability in business, but I knew that was something I wanted to potentially go into for a career. So I learned a lot about going outside my comfort zone and learning a lot along the way. I was also able to engage in my creative side, which is something I really enjoyed by learning how to use ArcGIS story maps. And then probably one of the most valuable skills I learned was interviewing and networking, which is something I didn't have a lot of experience with, but I was able to make a lot of connections in the field I'm interested in going into, and learned a lot about the intricacies of setting emission goals and how it's not as easy as it sounds. And then lastly, I learned a lot about being confident in my skills, particularly in such a self-guided, open-ended project. So I was able to set my own deadlines and use a lot of my own creative direction, which is something I'm not totally used to, but this helped me gain a lot of confidence in that area, which might have been nerve-wracking at first, but ended up being really beneficial. So I'm happy to announce that I'll also be continuing with CSE this summer as a full-time multimedia and communications intern for LIFT, which is something that CSE puts on annually. It's called the LIFT Challenge, and it is where students propose blended finance solutions for sustainability in the private sector. And so I will be using multimedia and communication strategies to explain the role that investment in finance plays in addressing the SDGs, climate change, social equity, things like that. So I'm really excited to continue my journey with CSE this summer. So thank you very much. If anyone has any questions, I'll open the floor to that.